Today's clip, I'm going to talk about OnlyFans and whether that's a viable side hustle or main hustle even, uh, depending on where you are in your fire journey. Hey, XenPuck here. Another day, not worrying about how to feed myself. I guess I do still worry about feeding myself in the sense that these days I make my own lunch. But that's because of the COVID situation, still loitering, and the fact that I currently don't have an access to a real kitchen, so my options are somewhat limited. Oh, well, boy, I went off on a tangent, didn't I? Well, that's the luxury money buys. The expression of my utter lack of focus. But hey, if you've watched some of my clips, then you probably are already aware of this part about me, eh? Okay, so actually I'm making this clip because a friend of mine responded to my thrashing of ride shares and food delivery as a viable side hustle, because she said, well, what about OnlyFans? That's kind of a viable gig economy job too these days. And I was like, well, first of all, don't you have to be a girl to do this job? But then I realized, no, that's a lie. I'm being old-fashioned. These days, anyone can work on OnlyFans. The only question is whether you can develop or already have an audience, right? So unless you're a relatively attractive person of any gender, I guess, it's still a bit of a problem to get that audience, right? Sadly, I personally will not be making money in this venue, but I am fascinated by all these new, types of venues of generating income. So let's take a quick trip down into the weeds to see who OnlyFans might be appropriate for, and whether it should be more of a side or a main hustle type of situation. So let's go, right? Oh, by the way, I just realized that maybe not everyone knows what OnlyFans is, right? To me, it's just a subscription-based cam girl boy type of platform. I mean, honestly, I'm not really sure how it's any different than the cam girl setup for the past 20 years, ever since like we got past dial-up essentially. But my guess is that it's really just the platform itself that's more streamlined and modern, right? Kind of like how we could always have gotten taxis in the past, but Uber/Lyft simply made that process easier, right? I think. Not an expert, but we'll share my 2 cents anyway. God bless the internet. Right, number one. For most people's economic situations, you'd need to be a very brave type of person and a natural-born entrepreneur type who also understands that you are most likely never going to have a regular old job ever again, right? If you're this type of person, I think OnlyFans is appropriate for you, right? I mean, we're in the 2020s at this point. The stigma of sex work's lessening, but I wouldn't say that it's gone by any measure, right? And certainly also very demographically divergent in terms of how people feel about it, right? So if you do decide to start doing, making money on OnlyFans, which is essentially sex work on camera, it's going to be a real pain to transition back into working at a, restaurant or retail or any kind of office job, right? Just imagine when your coworkers find out about your side hustle. After all, what's on the internet is basically forever, and we all know that part by now, right? And recall, ever since the advent of social media, plenty of people have lost their just regular job opportunities due to, say, an excessive party photo that they didn't set to private on Facebook, right? Yeah, your OnlyFans account would be like that, but 1,000 times worse in terms of how it's going to be perceived and how you'll be judged, right? Again, do what you want, just know that judgment is inevitable. Unlike most other easy-to-start gig economy jobs, I would argue because of this reason, OnlyFans actually do not work well as a side hustle, right? Because you essentially are in constant fear of being found out at your main gig. Now, the worst spot here is actually getting just popular enough that your coworkers find out, but not popular enough to actually support yourself with your sex work. So in a way, it is kind of similar to rideshares that you can really only make a living of this if you do it full time, right? Now, here's where my cynicism comes in, right? Because I'm thinking, God bless the gig economy and its empty promise of work flexibility to really drive home that it's not easy making money in any field, right? Whether you're your own boss, ostensibly speaking, right? Because you're working in the gig economy or not. Just, it's still difficult, right? Now, I want to mention for number 2, we're going to go all the way on the other side of the spectrum, right? Especially in terms of fire, right? Which is that if you've personally already achieved financial independence either through your hard work at a regular corporate job or let's say, you know, your trust fund baby, right? That essentially gets you in the same boat, right? And you just love expressing yourself or expressing yourself via bodily functions, then OnlyFans, I'd say, seems like something that you could do to take up your time. After all, I'm a strong believer that the whole point of retiring early is to do whatever you feel like, right? And to try new things, right? So maybe broadcasting yourself on the internet like an Amsterdamian lady of the night is exactly your cup of tea? You know, no judgment from me. Because if you don't need the money, this is certainly something to move on towards. Really, to me, it's just like any kind of influencer type of job, right? Because you need marketing, you need luck, memes, whatever. The reality is that the vast majority of content creators don't make much money, right? Certainly they don't when they just start out, right? So the mitigating factors to this type of obstacle is either doing it as a side hustle, which I said this specific type of gig work is bad for, or simply having the financial backings to do this for fun instead, right? Because if you do it for fun, there's also less pressure, and who knows, maybe you'll find out that maybe you'll luck out, right? That's the only way that I can put it. And finally, I want to mention something as to whether you should do OnlyFans as a job that has nothing to do with your current economic situation, which is you should, you know, participate in OnlyFans as your side hustle or main hustle if you are great at sex work. Obviously. Seems obvious, but I still have to say it, right? Here's where I'd argue, like, if you feel like sex work is really your preferred choice in careers and not just a job to pay you bills, then it's actually quite irrelevant what anybody else thinks about what it is that you do, right? I believe deeply that in any field that requires practice, but is probably also in some parts dictated by talent, you know, I think there's always some percentage of dudes and ladies that just have that it factor, right? In this particular case, it's to be sensual or sexy or whatever, all the qualities that I personally don't have, and I wouldn't know if it was a flying brick that hit me in the dome. So I can admire talented individuals in any field, right? Certainly in the field of sensuality that OnlyFans is trying to, you know, carve out a place in. I get it. And frankly, if you're one of those people, and you know you're one of those people, the only other hurdle in your way is getting rid of things like social expectations, right? I do believe that every person has some type of talent, you know, over others in their sphere, at least. And I love capitalism, right? So combine these two factors, and I would always support specialization whenever possible, right? The real and only question here is whether most people are actually cognizant of whatever gift it is that they actually have, right? After all, most people aren't comparing notes constantly about their sexual exploits. Or at least I don't think. Oh my god, I actually have no idea if that's actually true or not. Maybe ladies do compare notes? My noob is showing, I guess. In conclusion, I don't think OnlyFans is for everyone, obviously, or even most people, simply because we tend to stratify who most people find sexually attractive to a very minority right off the bat, right? So, however, in a way, even this type of work is still better than doing things like rideshare, food deliveries, right? This is how much I hate Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, right? Because if you're doing OnlyFans, at least you're creating more stable and long-lasting relationships with an audience, and you're developing some type of extremely personal type of skills, I suppose you could call it that. Again, better than simply driving, because that's not a skill, especially not in a country with 300 million vehicles, right? I'd call OnlyFans essentially, it's a very specific subset of the content creator influencer crowd, right? But like I think I've mentioned this in some other clip before, what I think about content creators and influencers as a career is that it's very high risk, high reward, right? So OnlyFans, as a subset of that, or a subset of that profession, is even more risk for, I would say, only a reasonably slightly higher level of reward, right? Now, again, you know, the Cash Me Outside girl did wonderfully on OnlyFans because she already had notoriety and she brought her own audience, right? Again, even her, who makes a great deal of money right off the bat at a platform like OnlyFans, I don't think that type of stream is sustainable because, you know, over time, less people would have heard about this girl because she's not even all that attractive, in my opinion. But she still falls under my objection number one, which is like, now that she decided to do this as work, she's never going to be able to break into certain spheres of, I guess, what people consider polite society, right? Again, no judgment from me, but that's the overall society. There is still some stigma attached to sex work, right? At the end of the day, my perspective will always remain skewed, right? Because I can never go and try this line of work. Yeah, so that's what it is, right? What about you guys? Does anyone have any direct experience and can comment about that? I'd really appreciate it. Till next time, cheers.